Good morning, scrapbookers and family historians. It's Katie Scott with another episode of the Century Scrapbook Project. And yesterday, when I did this, I woke up with an idea. And so it made it very easy for me to make a scrapbook page from 1 year in history. And I did not wake up with an idea today. So this is a different way to come at your Century Scrapbook Project. What the Century Scrapbook Project is making one page a day, or one page for each year of a century. And that yesterday I blogged about how it will eventually look. And so sort of can't really see that, but it says the Century Scrapbook Project episode number 3 was my album organization for this. And so my Century project is going to live in 3 barrister style bookcases in my office. And so it's going to be something where it will be completely in order and I can make sense of it for all of the stuff that I inherited as a family historian. So if you don't have that much stuff like I do, you won't need 3 barrister bookcases and think like you probably need 10 more. I inherited a lot of family history information. And so one of my issues is that there's so much that it's really hard to digest. So another thing that I'm doing in addition to this Century Scrapbook, which will be, and I'm really thinking it's gonna remain as one book. So it will be probably I think this is a 3-inch just Office Depot notebook. So it's 11. I'm gonna scrapbook in the format of 8.5 by 11, and this is just a regular notebook. And the thing that I like about the notebooks that I buy at the office supply store is that they've got this like plastic on the front of them, so you can change the cover and the binder very, very easily. So that's just one of the things that I'm doing. So this is what my book looks like so far. Oops, I'm just having a bit of issues here. Okay, so this book, I really want to say, is going to be like the table of contents almost for those 3 bookshelves worth of stuff. So if you just had time to look at one of those notebooks in all of those shelves, this would be where you would start. This is almost like this will be the table of contents, and it will have one page for each year. So far in this book I have 1945, and these will be scrapbooked stories because I have already a lot of family trees and printouts from what my dad did in Family Tree Maker. I have documents upon documents and photos and all sorts of things. So this would just be kind of like almost like, oh, do you want to see 1977? Well, this is just one picture from 1997. This is just one story from 1985. I guess my major complaint with what my dad and my grandfather did, and that sounds so bad, but sometimes if there's a problem with something, you can find a creative solution that makes a new discovery, and I think that's how discoveries are made. So I took the problem of my dad did a lot of family history research but didn't tell a lot of stories or put the pictures with the stories. So that's kind of that's what I'm doing. And I really consider my work in my family history as I'm just one link in the chain. And so at some point I'll die. And someone will need to pick up this torch, and if it's a jumbled up mess like what I inherited, if someone didn't have the passion for this that I have, which may be genetic, so chances are, one of my kids will inherit this, because it is, it's not something that you necessarily want to do when you're 16. When you get to be about 42, you think, wow, be nice to kind of make sense of where my place in life and my place in history, and how does it all fit together. So if I can make it easy to look at and interesting, then I think if if it looks like, oh, I would like to know more about Grace, the rebel skier wife, the girl who her used to sneak out of her Boston, Massachusetts dorm room to go on dates with my grandfather, and who then, once she got married to my grandfather, and she said, I want to go skiing with my girlfriends up in New Hampshire, and for some reason he said no. I'm not sure why. It could have been that it was tax season, who knows. But she went anyways, and then she went with her girlfriends, and when they got back to their place in New Bedford, she had to crawl through a window to get back in because she forgot her key. And so what another funny story to that is, then forever when I remember being with her, she was always checking, do I have my keys? Have I turned off the stove? Have I turned off the iron? She would have this almost OCD checklist of things to check before she left the house. And so, and my mother is always losing her keys. So one story will lead into another. And so there's a whole story about keys, and how I have a hook right near my door where that's where my keys go. Nowhere else. So I don't have that same problem. So learning from history is important. But it just kind of, what I would like this to be is one page from each year. And then there will also be just think of a reference, the reference section at the library. There will also be each branch of my family tree, and then probably my husband's too. So that would be 8 sections. I think. So we each have 2 parents. And they had 2 parents. I don't know. It could be 4 sections. It just kind of depends on how I organize that. But there would also be, a section for family trees and a section for timelines. And so this is where the Century Project scrapbook is starting. And it's just one notebook. So you don't have to have that big system that I have at my office. Except that if you do have all of that, it's a great way to get it all organized. But another way you can get it all organized is just, if you have a box full of stuff, start to go through it. But one thing that another thing, I really love office supplies and school supplies. I love just regular notebooks. They're easy to deal with. Last night in composition books. So last night I started just with a regular composition notebook, which is 100 sheets. I started the timeline of our family and for the Century Project, and I've labeled it on the edge with my husband's favorite P-Touch maker. But then what I did is, while I was watching TV last night, I just went through and put the year, so 2012, 2011, going, each page was 1 year, because this is 100 pages. So I did 1 page per year, because I will have up until the year I was born. So I would recommend, if you're doing this project, start right now and then go back with 1 page each year until the year you were born. And then after that, go to like every 2 years or every 5 years or every 10 years or whatever it's going to take to help you to like fill up the rest of that book. So half about, yeah, because I'm a I'm in middle age. So half of the book, I'm not quite, but getting there. Half of the book is 1 page a year. And then when I hit the 60s, I was born in 1970. So when I hit the 60s, wow, that's blurry. Hello, get in focus. Okay, so when I hit the 60s, I do once every every page is 5 years. So 1960 to 1964, and then 1965 to 1969, and I do that until I hit until I hit 1900. So if you did not have as much family history as I do, if you can't trace your stuff really easily back to the 1600s and beyond, then I would say probably do 2 years for each page. But I wanted to give more room in this book, so I just wanted it to be one book. So the thing about the family history is it can easily become a lot of stuff. Even if you're just starting yourself, I think that you can instantly, with Ancestry.com and with the technology that's out there now, you could go from 0 to 60 really quickly now. So it's nice to have your own little notebook. And while I love the internet, I've had things on the internet where, and it's probably not as much of an issue anymore, but I think that it still kind of is all the stuff that's going out there. What is your plan for finding it in 100 years? It probably will be able to find it, but it's also nice to have a notebook, because it's almost like slides, and I was complaining about photograph slides. They're hard to look at. And so if you've got like stuff on a floppy disk or a CD, 100 years from now, people might think, oh, that is hard to look at, or that we don't, I don't know. They'll probably come up with a solution, hopefully, in 100 years. But what if, like, my husband watches these doomsday shows about, oh, well, everything's gonna end in 2012. Well, here we are in 2012, and the Mayans thought this was the end of time. So what if something happens where the technology is substantially different? Who knows? A notebook, if it survives, and paper does survive for centuries, it's something that people can look at. So, and in the meantime, not worrying about like every aspect of the future, it's just something that's easy and accessible to you. And you can write notes down, and you can also feel like this is not like while it sort of is the permanent record, it's also a place where you can just jot stuff down. So once I hit 1900, then the 1800s I did every 10 years. And then once I hit the 1700s, I went to I kept it with every 10 years because I think I have a lot from the 1700s still. And then, yeah, once I hit the 1600s, which I still have quite a bit from, but I wanted to leave some more space. So I easily could have done every 10 years in the 1600s and filled that up. But I chose to go with every 25 years in the 1600s. So I have like from 1650 to 1674. And then when I hit the 1500s, I just go like the 1500s, the whole century is one page. 1400s, 1300s, and then just to be obnoxious or funny or whatever you want, I went all the way down to 0, going 100, and not, obviously I don't have family history from the hundreds. Okay, I mean, but I think that it would be interesting to just write, oh, the Phoenicians, discovered or invented the alphabet, or put things in there like that will just give you context. Jesus was born, the Columbus discovered the New World, but also like here were the Middle Ages, and so to give context in that way, and I can't remember what it was, but it was like, there's something about like the history of time, and I don't know if it's a Stephen Hawking thing or something like that, but it's like if you put the history of man into a timeline of the universe, that we are, like the universe, if the universe timeline was this long, like you wouldn't even be able to see, like the history of man would be like so teensy. And so I just kind of thought that's, and also my husband is super interested in like shows like Ancient Aliens, and I enjoy that too. But I think it's interesting to think about, what what happened before. And so then we go into BC, and then the ancients, and then Big Bang, or however you think the universe started. And I think like Forrest Gump, he was like, Mama said that it was God, and Jenny said it was science, and I think it's both. Well, I think it's both too. Okay, so there's a place where if you are getting started on a century project, I really recommend just taking a composition book and creating your timeline. And so this is your index to, and so these are some of the things that I'm writing. Like in 2012, I wrote about our vacations, our wedding anniversary, how old everyone turned in our family, and then I wrote stuff like the names of our office staff, because that that changes from year to year. We got new hamsters. Allison started gymnastics. We watched the Summer Olympics. Allison was improving in reading. Matt got his brown belt. I did the 30-day Bikram yoga challenge in April, and then I got on the Get It Scrapped creative team in June. And so 2012 can be pretty, and I've left some space, so other things, and we're in September, so we only have a few months of 2012 left, but I have space for any other big events. And then 2011, I wrote about our vacations, how old everyone turned in our immediate family. We had some births and adoptions, and the other thing I wrote was Charlie started playing the drums in a band. And then then I kind of ran out of time, but I also just went back to 2003 when my daughter was born and my father died. And so it's also interesting to see, when stuff happened, and then what else was happening at that same time. So if you just looked at, like a family tree, or if you looked at a family tree and it listed, like, here's all the people, and here's their birth dates and death dates, you wouldn't necessarily notice that my father died on October 15th, 2003, and my daughter was born November 21st of that same year. And so when you put it into this kind of a timeline, you might start to make some connections that you didn't see before. And that one, obviously I know about, but what will happen is when you go back to, let's go back a little further, 1770, and the interesting thing about that's when the Industrial Revolution was going on. And a similar thing happened. One of my relatives, Anthony, his name was Anthony Allen, who lived in Martha's Vineyard. He was in the Revolutionary War, and he died on a British ship in New York Harbor, and like 1 month after he died, his son Anthony Jr. was born. And so that's, those kinds of and I saw that connection, but you might not necessarily see those connections. And so those are the kinds of things where then you can't, and one of the reasons I'm interested in making those kinds of connections is then you can kind of get into the head of, well, I wonder how the mom felt about her husband just died in the Revolutionary War, and here she is, she's got a baby. Like, so it might be interesting to go back and look, well, what happens to her then? Did she get remarried? How does she support herself? What does she do? And so I think that would be, you can find, and then you can go back and research and maybe go back to books from that time period to find out, like, well, what were her options? And that's where, like, in that, it's an Ancestry.com, I think, TV show, Who Do You Think You Are? That's where, like, you can find the stories. So sometimes when I would watch that show, I would think, oh, how are you ever going to figure out those stories? Because that's really what I want to do. And this is one way, I think, an easy way that you can just start. And so I just want to show you, this is a box that I have where I have some family archives, okay? It is certainly not all of them, but if you have like 15 boxes or however many boxes of stuff like I do, it's good to put it into digestible little chunks. So one story that I discovered recently was that I was researching Ivory Fenderson, and a book was written about him by some ladies up in Maine, and it is called The Galloping Horses of Willowbrook. And you can get this on Amazon.com, and there's a link on my blog. My blog is Kiss and Tell Scrapbooking. It is a typepad blog, but I think it's just .com at this point. But in here we've got some dates, and what's so cool is it's a storybook, and so it's about like Papa Fenderson, and it's a true story, and it's really amazing. And you can go to this carousel in Maine and ride it now. But it's put out by Goose River Press of Waldoboro, Maine. And it's written by Judith, and I want to say her last name is Thing, spelled Thyn, and Jean Flahive. So that's called The Galloping Horses of Willowbrook. And one nice thing, this is like a historical, it's a story. And it's a true story. So what would you call that? It's not historical fiction. It's historical nonfiction, I guess, but it's a story. So who knows what you call that. Okay. So what's cool about what they've included is they've included some dates. And so I'm just going to take those dates and just put them into my little book here. So in 1863, Ivory Fenderson was born. So I can just write that easily in here, and I might add some tabs. So as I'm doing this process, I am discovering it would be helpful if I could organize in this way or that way so that I can really get this project accomplished in a good way. So even if you're just going to tackle one century, 100 years, like say from now till 2012 through 1912, it's still useful to know like the century before that, because people that were in this century or in the 1900s were a lot of them born in the 1800s. So like your great grandparents, and I think even if you don't have extensive family history, those are, the 1800s and the 1700s are still going to be important to your process. That's what I think. Okay, so I like to just draw a line down the middle of my composition book, and then I will just write 1863, and they don't have the month, but Ivory H. Fenderson. And then I don't have to write every single detail because I also have an Ancestry.com account, and all of the stuff is in there. So if I wanted to know about Ivory H. Fenderson, I could go to my Ancestry.com account and look up and see all about him. But I'm just, he was born in 1863, and then in 1894, that's when, and so one thing about the family trees that's awesome is family trees include typically like the birth and death. Sometimes, like in old family Bibles, you'll also see like baptisms and marriage dates and that kind of thing. But you don't really get like life events, and that was another beef that I had with them. You know, happy to have the family history, but really wished there were more connections. So from that wish, that's the wish I'm going to fulfill, and yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. And so, you know, and then my kids will probably wish, oh, well, I wish Mom would have had da 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 da. But and I think the next like new brave frontier in genealogy is getting your cheek swabbed, and so then people are doing this now, especially people who are descended from Ireland and Scotland and England especially, is you can get your cheek swabbed and they will tell you where you're from. So if you don't know your family history, you can get this DNA test and find out if you're from the British Isles. Just because there are a lot of genealogists in the British Isles, so that you know, it's just the most documented. So if another region did the same thing, then it would be, you could do that too. So now I'm looking for fascinated with the steam broiler carousels. Ivory ordered an Armitage Herschel carousel in 1894. So I want to write that in 1894. I'm going to look. Yeah, tabs would be useful. 1889, 1890. Okay. And the other thing about this composition book is, what I'm planning to do is, this side is my timeline. This is where I'll record stuff. And then on the right hand side. On the left hand side, I'm almost going to use this like an old school scrapbook, where I will, like, you know, with a glue stick or some double-sided tape, stick in pictures, or small, but I might even go to my library and get some old magazines, because my library has a place where they sell old books. So if I could find, like, you know, the World Book or some kind of the history of the 19th century that I could cut up and then put the pictures in on this side, especially, you know, as I get. So I guess I want to use this left side to record world events and, you know, things that are going on in the world and in America, but also like pictures of like typical dress from that time, and or appliances or things like that, where I could look at the timeline and then easily, by looking at the pictures on this side, go, okay, I get a feeling for that time period, and it's easy to, you know, if I'm looking up when was so and so born, I can look on this page and not have to go to Google or anywhere else to kind of go, oh, okay, I see about what was going on in that time. And that's really where, you know, when I get in, you know, super back in time, like to the 900s, it would be interesting to have pictures of, you know, here's an artifact, or here's when the pyramids were built, or whatever. I don't know. I just think that would be super. I just think that's going to be a good tool. So now I'll just write in, where were we? 1894. Avery Fenderson. And I'm not going to keep doing this, but Avery Fenderson bought his carousel. Carousel. Okay, and I'm just gonna write he lived in Saco, Maine. And what was so cool is he took this carousel and he traveled around Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. So one thing that I would like to do, and maybe these ladies have done, is I wonder if in like old newspapers there was like the fair's coming to town. I would love to get like an article like that. And here they do have a photo here, and so there's some more dates. And I'm not going to record them right here, but I'm going to take all of those dates that are referenced in this article and put them into my timeline. But this is just a way to, if you have a box of old family photos, this is a way to start dealing with them. So here's just, and I really, with the old stuff, I don't really throw anything away. So even, I think this went with this. Yep. But I'm not going to, so when I get a picture like this, I have this guy here, this dude. The other thing that's going to happen with family history and the old pictures is, with face recognition software, you're going to be able to tell, like, who is this dude? Okay. Because it came from my dad's side, I'm pretty sure that he's a Fenderson. But there is no, but he could be a Grieve. He could be from my grandmother's, you know, my paternal grandmother. But with face recognition software, we're going to be able to tell exactly who he is. But and also, the reason you don't ever want to throw out these things is sometimes in very light pencil, there'll be numbers. And I think that the numbers had to do with the photographer, like who took the picture, like who that might have been. So this was taken, and you can see in very, very light. Like sometimes they'll be the photographer. Campbell in Calais, Maine. So yeah, he's totally gonna be a Fenderson. That might be I bet you that's my great grandfather. But that's who it is. If that was, anyways. So I got a lot of pictures of him. One of my great grandfathers. Oh yeah, here we go. This looks like the same guy. And the other thing is to scan these in, and then if you could print them up as thumbnails, then you could put the thumbnails. You don't want to have, we need to keep this small, so you could keep the thumbnails of these folks with the dates. So now I know who he is. And I think this is the same guy. And this is just when he was a little bit older. He looks exactly the same. It says Asha here, ACHSHA. Here is one of Grandpa's pictures. He told me to send it to you. MRF. So I'm not sure who that is. MRF. But his name, then it says William Penn Fenderson. So yeah, that's not my great. It's like my great, I think. Like 3 times great. But it doesn't have the date, and I don't have him in here yet. So I would need to look at, I would need to go look at the family tree to figure out, well, when was he born and when did he die? And then maybe I could put the thumbnail of him in. I love this picture. I love this picture because you know that people way back when did not take a lot of pictures, and I think it took a long time to take a picture. So the baby sneezed, and the girl is like laughing. She's smile like they didn't really smile back then, but she is smiling. So I just love that photo. But I think that's William Penn Fenderson there too. And so I think to print all of these up as thumbnails, and I have a scrapbook page that I made recently with some DIY hexagons, and I reprinted this picture and wrote, "Who was she?" And I think that probably with a little research, even though I don't have her name here, and I really don't want to, with this photo, the way they've matted it is it's one that I'm not going to take apart. They've matted it in between like what looks like two cardstocks, and I think to take it apart I would wreck this, and I don't think there's probably any name back there, but I think I can figure out who she is, and then it would be so cool so I have this scrapbook page called "Who is she?" and then I could maybe come up with an answer and have that in the scrapbook page album, which would be so fun. But it's just good to like go through, even if you have like lots and lots, just start to go through and like get familiar with the stuff. I am super lucky because I have all of these records from my dad. He, you know, printed things out. So I have the Fenderson family, children of John Fenderson and Keza Dolly Croxford. And then it will go through, and he's got, you know, all of their 12 children. Because they used to crank out about 12 to 14 children. Seriously, it was amazing. I think a lot of times, like, not everyone survived. So, anyways, I've got lots and lots of dates in here. So, and then it almost gets like, oh my gosh, there's so many dates in here. I could be spending a lot of time putting everything in here. So what I recommend with, if you are a scrapbooker who wants to combine scrapbooking and family history, and you already have a lot of family history, just pick one. And that is, you know, just pick one thing. So we could just pick like Eliza Fenderson celebrated her 83rd birthday on Sunday, and the Saco woman. And so it got, you know, just pick, and this, you can actually find like quite a bit of information in old newspapers. And so this was it looks like an article from 1906. And they really go into like crazy detail about, like, especially local papers. So if you know where your people are from, you can find like Mrs. Fenderson was born in Calais, Maine. Her maiden name was Eliza Ann Lane. When quite young, she began doing housework for some of the neighbors. She was paid 50 cents a week as a house girl, and at the age of 19 made up her mind that she had toiled long enough in that capacity, and she would come to Saco and work in the cotton mills. She did not have a friend or relative in Saco, and all that she knew about the town was that what she read in the Portland transcript. She went on a schooner from Calais to Eastport, and thence to Portland on a steamer. I can't get. And then it goes, you know, it goes through. Huh, this is funny. She came to Saco by Old Portland, Saco and Portsmouth Railroad, and secured work. And so if I were doing a scrapbook page about Miss Eliza, and I didn't have a picture of Miss Eliza, then I would maybe, you know, look online and just Google the Saco and Portsmouth Railroad, and then print a picture of that railroad, and then I could tell the story with a picture, even if I didn't have a picture of her. At the end of, just reading this because I haven't read it before, and it's interesting. She came to Saco by the railroad and secured work in the York mills in the weaving department. This was in 1842. So that's a thing that, 1842, I can like throw that in there. At the end of a year, she returned to her home for a vacation. She had not informed her parents that she was to return, and one night, just as it was dark, she knocked at the door of the old homestead. Her father answered the rap, and a young woman inquired, "Could you..." Oh, it says, "Could you give a strange woman lodging for a night?" The mother replied that she did not have a very good accommodations and invited the girl inside. Miss Lane asked the girl how she had been in town, and then she replied, "But a short time," and the mother did not recognize her daughter, not until Mrs. Fenderson, and it goes, like, there's an interesting story, and I don't know, it looks like this was a story from a newspaper because of the way that the title is. It doesn't have the newspaper. But you can find, if you know where your family's from, you can go, and there's records online to find local newspapers, and they really, like, if someone got married, they would tell you, like, and the dresses were made in a peachy pink color, and all, you know, with empire waistlines, and they really went into crazy detail. Here's an article from 1912, and here we are in a year of election, and so this is about a presidential election. Supporter of president John Fenderson, formerly of Parsonsfield, is 87 and in good health. The following letter has been received from a longtime subscriber to the journal. So I kind of want to see, like, well, which journal was this? Waverly, Massachusetts, April 5th, 1912. To the publisher of the journal, enclosed, please find for renewal my subscription for 1912. I hope and expect to continue a subscriber to the journal until the end comes. Until the end comes. At present, am in good health and expect to vote for Taft next fall. John Fenderson. It will be of interest to the journal readers to know that Mr. Fenderson is in his 87th year. He was born in Parsonsville, March 16th, 1826. And see that these are still all dates that I can glean from articles. And so if you just have this as kind of like your index, like all of this whole box can be like, this can be your reference for this. But also I think that don't spend all of your time, if you're a scrapbooker and want to do your family history, you could easily just be documenting dates for the rest of time, and that's not the goal. And so the goal is to just find one, you know, find one person or one date or one story and then tell it on a scrapbook page. Let's just finish with this though. This is interesting. And so it really does, it goes to, he was born at March 16th, 1826, in the service of Fitchburg Railroad, later Fitchburg Division of the Boston and Maine, from September 1st. Oh, and I think I have a Boston and Maine, like, train, you know, one of those little trains. At the second election of President Lincoln, he was one of the selectmen of Malden, Massachusetts, and assisted in counting Malden's vote for Lincoln at that election. Mr. Fenderson served 3 years in the city government of Charleston from 1871 to 1876 and was in council 2 years and on the board alderman 1 year and was moved to Waverly in 1874. So that's interesting. That's kind of cool. It's like a connection that you can make to, you know, yesterday morning my husband was like, come take a picture of me, which he never says. And he got an Obama t-shirt for 2012, and so I could take that t-shirt, you know, that picture from yesterday. I think that's the story of today. This is where I use my concept of, you know, applying improvisational concepts to scrapbooking, where I'm listening, but then I'm also waiting for a spark. And so that's my story for today, for my century project. But you know what? It's gonna bug. It's not gonna bug me that bad. But this is not about the 1900s. Oh, here we go. Yes, it is 1912. So I have my story for 1912 for my my century project. There we go. So I'm going to use that as my story, and I could easily write about lots and lots of stories, but I'm just going to put a little mark there, because if I was just doing what my dad did and writing down dates, then I would never get to discover the stories, and then I would also never get to make it look interesting so somebody might be interested in the future. So rather than, and I'm tempted, but I'm not, I'm going to stop myself from keeping on, because I think that I'm somewhat unique, and I don't think most people have as much already done for them as I do. But I think everybody probably has some. Well, I don't think everybody has some, but if you're in a situation like I am, where you have a lot of family history, don't let it overwhelm you. Just take it into little chunks. Pick one story each day. If you can make, or each time that you scrapbook, if you could just take one thing, and then what I'm trying to do with my century project is hit every single year of the 1900s. So I now have my story for 1912. So there we go. Okay, that's all for today. I'm losing my voice, but I'm Katie Scott with Kiss and Tell Scrapbooking. It is a typepad blog, and you can find me online at Kiss and Tell Scrapbooking. And see if I can see if you can ever see the. Oop. But I've kind of committed myself to, for the next 100 days, telling a story every day for this century project. And that's sort of what my blog looks like. You can't see it. Okay. Whatever. Okay. Have a great day. Bye-bye.